One. Good evening and welcome to the Special Education Advisory Committee meeting for Thursday, June 4th, 2026. I would like to call this meeting to order. First, I'd like to start with our land acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas and Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, live, and learn. I'd like then to proceed to our roll call. I will start to my left.
Elizabeth Daniel, representing the Learning Disabilities Association of Durham Region.
Anthony Phelan, representing Durham administrators.
Allison Amer, representing Easter Seals. Donna Edwards, trustee Gray Jeffs.
Shauna Haley, representing the Grandview Kids Family Advisory Council.
Carmen Brown, representing Ontario Parents of Visually Impaired Children.
Nancy Adams, System Lead for Inclusive Student Services.
Joe Rayleigh, System Lead in Student Services.
Lisa Rye, recording secretary. Laura Bliss, superintendent of Inclusive Student Services. And I'm just going to introduce Fatima, who has stepped out for a moment, but Fatima Beauregard is joining us for a presentation this evening. Senior manager and clinical lead of speech, language, and hearing services. Lyle.
Oh, yes, I was going to say Lyle
Good evening, everyone. Lyle Williams, member at large.
and Tara Pelly, Durham Down Syndrome Association, and chairing today. We have regrets from Eva Kyriakides from the Association for Bright Children. We have regrets from Sensa Burnett Burrell from Autism Ontario, and Jessica Wells, our other member at large. Now we're moving on to approval of the agenda. There is a couple of amendments under the association reports. Item number 10, 2 additional items for the LDA-ER. So with those adds under our association reports, item number 10, could I get a motion to approve the agenda? Donna, seconds. Liz, all in favor? Carried. All right, then working on to our next item, approval of minutes for May 7th, 2026. Does anyone have any questions, comments, omissions on those minutes? Allison.
When I open them, I get April. Does any set? Am I opening the wrong document, or at least it says April on the top? Maybe it's just the date on the top that's wrong. Okay.
I have mine. Right here. Oh, yeah. It does. It's just within it is correct.
Okay, just.
I will update that. Thank you.
So with that correction noted, any other comments, questions? Gold star, Allison. Thanks for checking. Could I get a motion to approve the minutes with the updated date on them? Allison, seconds. Liz, all in favor? Right, should carry. All right, moving on to item number 6, our staff report.
Hey, hi, good evening. My name is Joe Rayleigh. Our first meeting, but I'm here, so it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure to bring forward the staff report. There's lots of great news that we have to share. Starting with the abilities meet, which happened Wednesday, June 3rd, which is the secondary abilities meet. It was hosted at the Ability Center in Whitby, which was a really great venue for this event. All secondary schools had representation yesterday with athletes from across our region competing in a variety of events. And then today, Thursday, we had the elementary abilities meet where over 1,000 students participated. And it was, I was there for a couple hours this morning. It's again, just an amazing event. I would strongly encourage everyone who has not yet had the opportunity to go and visit during this time. I want to send a special thank you to DIA, the Durham Elementary Athletic Association, and all the staff and student volunteers who helped to bring this event together and make it possible. We have a video, and I want to highlight thank you to Jonathan for pulling this together. I also want to mention that I know that we share out at the board meetings as well, and sometimes I don't know if this was meant to go ahead of the board meeting, and I'm going ahead of the board meeting, I would like to then just simply say for the record that my name is Connor Jenkins. Omar, but here's a video of today, which thank you again to Jonathan. A little snippet of what was going on today. Just to highlight, and I've heard feedback both yesterday and today, that typically or in the past, the event was held at the Oshawa Civic. And although due to construction, the Oshawa Civic is not available, the overwhelming consensus is that hosting it at the Ability Center and down at Iroquois Park is a really great venue. And everyone says that they couldn't imagine it going anywhere else. I think for a couple reasons. One, it brings families into the Ability Center who may not know of that place, which is just an awesome place to be. And it just has so many benefits to it, including being indoors and the space that we're not having to navigate like a rain day, right? And all the pieces. So it's really, really fun. Keeping on the theme of sports, want to highlight JCR, J. Clark Richardson, for excellence in their unified sports program. So here's just a quote from JCR staff member who shared that Richardson completed the trifecta this week at the Unified School Championships in London, Ontario, where they won gold in unified basketball, unified floorball, unified soccer. They also had all of their track athletes win a gold in at least one of their 4 events, meaning that every athlete who competed for JCR was a gold medal winner at the provincials. That's an incredible accomplishment and a testament to the amazing program that they have at JCR. Further to that, from the principal, she wanted to highlight, Jennifer Fletcher wanted to highlight that the leadership students who joined JCR for that event were key in supporting the bocce tournaments for elementary schools that attended, and that was for all schools across who attended the Unified Sports Program. So that was excellence as well. There are a couple pictures of students who participated. So we're going to move now from a sports theme. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Nancy to talk to service animals.
So service animals is part of my portfolio and as part of PPM 163. Each year we need to share a report regarding the service animals that are implemented and utilized on a daily basis in our schools. So this year, our active service animals, we have 1 in elementary and 4 at the secondary panel. We had no new requests this year. The breeds of dogs is part of what I need to share with you tonight. So they are Labradors or Golden Retrievers. And some of the needs that these service animals provide is they support with sensory, medical, therapeutic, and or emotional support services. So we're always happy to have our service animals join and support our students in classrooms.
Thank you, Nancy. So moving from, it's an update to the student voice, which was mentioned at the last SEAC. So there's an example of the agenda. So the first student voice meeting for students who attend PLP programs across our district and secondary schools was held. This event was organized by our transition coordinators, primarily Ashley Romano. So thank you to her and the team for bringing this together. This was the launch meeting. We had 3 schools represented, and hope to have many more in the fall. Those schools that had representation were Jill Roberts, Eastdale, and Dr. Wilson. The students engaged in a couple of activities. The first activity was developing a name. And so the preliminary name that we're still working through, but it was the Student Launch Executive, or SLE, with a mission statement of bridges to impact. And so that'll get finalized at our next meeting. And then beyond that, we have students from the group who are expert in the use of the Cricut machines, and they are developing a logo, which will go on some swag for the students. And we'll be able to start to build that out and to capture student voice around, what they would like to see in terms of helping them as they transition from high school to beyond high school, and whatever that may look like for them in the many paths to success. So it's very exciting, and it was nice to see the students come together and participate there. Speaking about student connection, so I wanted to highlight our transition to work program in the Student Connection event. This was hosted here at the DDSB Education Center. This was an opportunity to bring the students in our 5 transition to work programs from across the district together for an opportunity to learn and connect. There was specifically a focus on creating digital portfolios to be able to support future goals. One of the pieces that was noted in the program is that students were building and developing resumes and also building paper portfolios. And so it was suggested that the students be engaged in building a digital portfolio that they can then take and share with potential future employers or agencies that they may want to volunteer with, as a way to not only highlight their skills, but document and archive all the things that they've done, and have the ability to share and provide those skills and experiences and gifts and talents that they have to share with our organizations in the community. Speaking of work education, one of the pieces that we're focusing on is taking the idea of building small businesses. This is a way to encourage entrepreneurship as part of work education, and to really explore and allow, as mentioned, students the intrinsic talents and gifts that they bring, and be able to support them in helping to build those out and potentially turn them into either businesses that would be volunteer or nonprofit, or potentially businesses that are run for profit. So here's an example of Brooklyn High School's plant sale. We're to build plant sale businesses. And then it isn't just strictly for the secondary schools, but also at the elementary level. And I realize that's very small and for me very difficult to read, so I apologize. But also at Bolton C. Falvey, an elementary school here in South Ajax, a clothing pop-up boutique, where students were going through the process of building an actual for-profit, building a business. In this case, it's nonprofit, but having to understand how to navigate costs and inventory and space and marketing and all the things that we needed. So really trying to leverage where possible. Work education can look like building out entrepreneurship. And to be fair, one of the pieces that motivated this was the student who is just expert in the Cricut machine and is already running a very successful Cricut business out of his classroom. And is doing great work, doing really amazing work. And sharing those skills, and then being able to actually teach others to also utilize those skills as well. So I think it's important for all students to know that work education or work experience can be where you go and seek employment, where you work for a place, maybe like a DDSB, or where you work for yourself. They can be very successful in taking your unique gifts and talents and turning them into something that others would want to invest in. So I think that's a really important element. Finally here for my,
That's me, yeah.
great, so that wraps up my section. I'm gonna turn it over to Lauren, who's gonna take it from here.
Wouldn't have been able probably to speak to that one. I just wanted to thank the team here for the feedback you gave to the special education plan, to the draft special education plan. We did take that to standing and got a little bit of feedback. So we have a little bit of additions to add to that, and then we're taking it back to board for final approval on June 15th. But thank you. We did incorporate the feedback that you provided in the little sheet. So we appreciate that. Also wanted to thank Tara for her deputation on Tuesday night at Education and Finance Committee meeting. And just want to reiterate the district's commitment to ensuring that we're maintaining services and supports for our students being supported through inclusive student services and continuing to spend above all. So we do have a budget overview booklet that we'll share with you tonight. That's just a general sense of the budget for this year. But a few things that I wanted to be really specific and talk to you about staff and structures, because we did, staff and supports that exist. We did have a community member who came to the finance committee meeting and just expressed concern over staffing and ongoing supports and classes being offered for students. So I thought it would be important to share a few things with you about next year and what we're looking at. So in the system, you can see on the slide here, it's quite small, but we are actually increasing our complement of special education classes in the district by 3. So we have 1 elementary PLP class that's opening, and we have 2 secondary classes, a PLP class in secondary and a developmental class in secondary. But I also wanted to share back, I believe it was in February, Connor talked a little bit about the process. We started the process of really looking at the needs of the system and determining the classes that were needed to support the needs of students next year. So what you're seeing on the screen is what a relocation means is when we have a group of students that are in a class. So let's say they're at one particular school. The kids in that class change over time and where they come from. Because when we put let's say a class in Whitby, students might be coming from lots of different areas within Whitby to get to that class. And as the class grows and changes, the address of those kids changes as well. And so over time, sometimes, let's say it's the classroom is at Ormiston, and maybe the majority of the kids in that Ormiston class were close to Ormiston, but over time they changed and now they're closer to Sir Sam Steele, for example. We relocate classes when the need or when the demographic of the students change, and it's to support transportation as well to make sure that we can get to the kids to the classes. And so when you see a relocation, that means that the class isn't closing, we're just moving it to another school. So in elementary, we had 2 developmental classes that moved to different schools and 6 PLP classes that moved. The 6 PLP classes that moved, that was a result of the new Whitby schools that we have opening. And so we opened new classes in those new schools. And so we had kids that had to move, they're moving closer to their home school, which is nice. So get to be within community. And then at the secondary level, we relocated 2 developmental classes and 4 practical learning classes. A relocation is different than a close because when we relocate, there's opportunity for the staff within the class to go with the kids to the new school as well. So that's why we don't call it a close. We're not closing it in one school and moving it to opening another. It's a relocation because the staff move with them. Closes would be, although we closed what you're seeing on the screen there, so we closed 5 school support program classes, and we closed 2 senior school support program classes, and 2 transition to work program classes and 1 practical learning class. Even though we closed those, we opened other classes. So when we close something, it's because we're looking at the needs of the system over time. And for example, you can see in elementary, we closed 5 school support program classes. And we're not seeing the same need for those particular classes. UDL has done an excellent job of teachers being able to support students in the classrooms in their regular class with indirect support. But we were seeing a significant need for additional PLP classes. So you can see we closed 5 school support program classes and opened 6 PLP learning classes. So 1 extra class, the 1 extra class I talked about earlier. And again, at the secondary level, you can see we closed the 2 senior support program SSP classes, 2 transition to work classes, and a practical learning, but opened, this is where we opened 2 additional classes this year. We have now 4 practical PLP classes, 2 transition to work, and 1 developmental. Not anticipating any closing of any gifted classes at this time. So we will be status quo for gifted for next year. We have a very small, slight change in staffing for ISS next year. We have 2 assistive technology trainer positions that we're not continuing into next year. So those assistive technology trainers are individuals who were working centrally. And when a student received a SEA device, they would go into the school and support the student with the learning how to use their SEA device and the assistive technology that goes along with the SEA device. What we're doing is in our commitment to UDL and modernizing our approach. If you think back to when Carolyn and Caroline came in and did the presentation for us about assistive technologies available on every single student's Chromebook, having somebody come centrally and just work with 1 or 2 students at the school when all students have access to the technologies but aren't necessarily learning how to use it. We wanted to modernize approach by providing professional learning to all staff across the system, EAs, teachers, to ensure that they understand the technology tools themselves and can implement those. We still have Carolyn and Caroline, they are our instructional facilitators. They are still continuing in their roles, and we still have an assistive technology trainer as well that will also support. We're down by 2, but we still have people in those particular roles. So I wanted to share that. And the last piece we wanted to share with you are our impact updates are an important part of I know are a very important part of sort of keeping track of how we're doing as a team in terms of SEAC moving along throughout the year. Impact updates happened in October, I think September, October, November, and then we put a pause to them. We weren't sure that the impact updates were meeting the needs of the system, and we weren't sure that they were being seen by many. So we really also wanted to modernize impact updates. So what we had hoped to bring to you today, it just wasn't, we were so close today, it's just not quite ready, but we are creating a digital impact update. So what it's going to be is something that it's going to have videos and similar to kind of what you saw today, where we'll have a video of what the event was and who we served in that particular event. It will have information for you about how we're offering PD to staff members and how we're supporting kids. And we're going to do that digitally so that those will still continue to go on the website. We'll still continue to share them at SEAC, but they're just that way we can actually use them on a social media account. So we believe we'll reach a larger audience through that process. So we will have that for you. I'm hoping to share a sample with you before the end of the year so that you can see what it's about. So that's my update. Happy to take any questions.
Questions?
Yeah, I guess I'm sorry, I'm just trying to process the SSP program closures. I can see that you're opening some other programs, which is great.
Yeah.
But my concern is that I still hear from many families that they don't feel like a regular, even with UDL, I know the school board's doing a lot to support kids that way, but I do feel like there's a subset of children who are not going to be successful in a regular class due to like sensory needs or some other needs that they might have, and they need some kind of alternative placement. And I see that we're supporting types of students who are going to be well supported in a PLP program, but it seems like we're losing this middle ground of a different placement for students that don't have those same learning needs, but need some kind of environmental accommodation. And like I was just talking to a parent yesterday or the day before about this issue, and she said she was expecting the SSP placement for her child and didn't get it. And now I'm seeing that it's probably because we're closing all of these programs. And she said she's having to keep her child home for over 30 days this year as mental health breaks because they aren't able to, despite everything the school's done to try to support them there, they just can't be in that environment constantly without breaks from it. and a smaller class placement would help their child to be able to be at school every day. So my concern is for these other children where it's impacting their mental health and their ability to function, and how that's impacting their families as well with having to miss work. And I think it's happening quietly because families are just keeping their kids home to give them these mental health breaks. But really, it's like a form of kind of like exclusion from school for the child, right? Because if we don't have a place that's able to meet their needs, then they are being excluded. So that's my concern, I guess. And I wonder, when I hear things like, that there isn't a need for it, I'm wondering what data that's based off of. Like, have we done a survey with families and are we asking them, do you feel like your child's needs are being met in a regular class, or do you wish there was a small class placement available? Because something like that, I think would give that statement a little bit more substance. Otherwise, it's hard to understand where, who's making that decision, right? And what it's based off of.
I appreciate the feedback. So certainly, when we make decisions about changes in programs being offered, they're not easy decisions. Then the instructional facilitators are working very closely with each individual school, the needs of each individual student at those schools to determine appropriate placements. When we offer placements for SSP or PLP programs, we do so believing that that's the most appropriate placement for student. If there are students that are not being recommended for placement, I can't speak to those specifically, because what I do know is that there are families who do really want those placements. But we also know that with the correct support, students can be supported in a student classroom. So it's really hard without the individual context of the student. Hard to answer that question, but certainly appreciate the feedback and know that we work very, very hard to make sure that the decisions that we make on placements are based on needs of the system. And it does change each year, and definitely based on interest in programs, number of names that are coming forward. So.
Awesome.
Oh, so I think you were first, you go ahead.
Sorry.
Oh,
Hi, Kelly.
Thank you so much. What was my question? My question was regarding, okay, so I'm hearing about our SLP placements, and I know in general parents are sometimes unsure about the placements. But what I wanted to ask is, are we currently looking into class? Okay, so for example, so when we have in-class supports instead of separate, outside of the classroom place, like a special, what do we call it? Special classroom,
Special education business.
right, a separate outside of. Are we thinking about spaces where they can have some activities or some programming in, like they have with peers outside, so that it's not necessarily that they have a whole separate class for the whole day, but they will have those other opportunities to engage with similar peers? Is that something
It
that?
does. So in our programs, like PLP program, for example, students spend half of their day in their PLP class and half of their day in integration. So that model does exist in our system, so that we have opportunity for kids not to just be in the one space, but integrated with other students in the other.
Okay, so just from the feedback I'm always hearing, I think we've discussed this many times. I think for me, it's parents just kind of needing to, or maybe just understanding in terms of our ratios and the individual need, and that those opportunities are there. Because of what I always hear from parents are, I'm worried about my child not being able to communicate with the peers. They're similar, but they have the other opportunities in those spaces. And I think that's helpful because it's activity and programming. So for example, if the goal or skills was maybe making social skills building, or that was the need for that particular individual child, well, there'll be other opportunities outside of the main classroom. So that's what I wanted to, just bring that feedback, because I hear a lot of parents maybe not clear, and I think that reduces some of the anxiety once they understand realistically what are the actual options to meet those individual goals.
Thank you. And I'm just wondering if, I was just wondering if maybe we needed some clarification in the special education plan around those classes and the access, the integration components that I'm just wondering, I want to make sure that's clear. So yeah, that's good feedback. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Chair. I'm thinking about the closing of those, courses, the programs, and wondering, I'm assuming that that means that some children then who were in the programs that were closed will be transitioned into a regular classroom. So I'm just imagining that the parents that are being given that news probably this week are going to be concerned about the amount of support that their child is entitled to, or whether their child can be assured of a certain amount of support. And I guess there must be transition meetings happening this week, because I've heard from 3 parents who have expressed concern about just the ambiguity and the vagueness around how much support their child is entitled to. And these aren't children transitioning from school support programs, they're just transitioning from one board to another in one case, school to another in another case. And so I'm just wondering if we have anticipated what we will tell parents, especially in this case where they're will be used to small classrooms with lots of support. I can imagine the stress that those parents will be under, wondering what kind of support their child is entitled to, and assuming they're getting the kind of standard ambiguous answer that I've been hearing about this week, which is, we don't know, we'll know towards the end of the summer. And that's really hard for a parent to just roll with, especially in a case like this, if they were in a support program.
Can I ask, can you give me well, I'm just wondering, it would be really important for us to know when you're like having those phone calls that the experience that families are having. Is it possible to share that? If you do have families reach out, can you share with our team? Because I think it's really important. We can, it helps us move forward in terms of how we're going to support those transitions and what needs to change potentially within the system, but we don't necessarily know you're getting those calls. So if you could let us know, that would be great.
And so do you mean to get their permission for you to be in contact with them?
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be that, but just in your feedback right now, that sharing of that feedback could drive the decisions on how we support transitions within schools, right? So that even in terms of transition planning for students, like if there's a piece that's missing or that needs to be addressed, your feedback on what the system is experiencing is really important for us to make those decisions. So don't wait, like you don't have to wait till a SEAC meeting to share that information. I'm happy to receive it at any point if you're getting feedback from families that transitions have been a challenge. Because we could certainly, if there's things that we can do to change process,
for sure. But it's not, the concern that was expressed to me was just that there seems to be a party line that parents are given with respect to their EA support.
Okay.
And that's really frustrating. And in none of the cases that I'm aware of was it a child who was moving from a school support program into a regular classroom. I'm just thinking that would be a very unique situation where parents would rightfully be very concerned about what's it going to look like in a class with 3 times as many students, and just to be given that very standard line. And I've heard it too, as a grandma, 2 years in a row, that very standard line of, we don't know, we'll find out in September, it all depends on what other needs are in the school. And that's just really no assurance for a parent. So just if there could be some reframing of what the response could be, even if it was, well, here are our typical ranges, and you'll be involved in that decision making, just those kinds of assurances that parents are so hungry for.
Oh, if you wouldn't mind. Yes, please. Just having the opportunity to work alongside our instructional facilitators. In the case where a school support program, so we refer to them as SSP, so school support program, where there was a closure. For one particular school, there were 3 applicants So we made sure when thinking of these 3 applicants that were coming in from grade 8 to grade 9, speaking with the high school to say what intervention programs can we put in place, knowing that these were 3 candidates for consideration. And with an SSP, it often is a short-term program, so it's kind of intervention for literacy or numeracy, for example. So then of the students that may have had another year or hadn't met their IEP goals, there's been conversation with the instructional facilitator and the school team to say, okay, what intervention courses can we prioritize these students so that they have access to it, knowing that they haven't met all of their goals yet. So there has been very deliberate conversations with school teams to recognize that what's happening to these students, how are we wrapping around supports. So in this particular example, the school team were prepared for IPRC conversations and transition conversations to explain to parents what the plan is for their child.
It's good to hear. Jonathan, I think you have Charmaine, do you have a?
You can go ahead.
You have to ask a question, yeah, Charmaine, go ahead.
I was wondering if these numbers and these changes impact students, or if there's separate data around what's happening with students who are around support for students who are blind, low vision, and hearing impaired or deaf. Is there any changes there?
There are not, no. Nancy, I'm actually gonna turn that to Nancy, because that is Nancy's portfolio.
Yes.
So I know she'd be happy to answer that.
So this would not directly impact those students. Level of service for our students that are blind, low vision, or deaf and hard of hearing is based on needs and assessments that are done every year. And so they are directly assigned a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing or a teacher of the blind, low vision, and their service is determined based on a matrix and what they call the Common Core Curriculum goals and IEP goals. So that would not have any connection to this. Their assigned teacher would remain. So there's no reduction in that regard.
And the ratio between how many students that vision itinerant has to student, has that changed?
It increases based on new students coming in. For example, both areas of exceptionality, we have some new JKs that are coming in. So we look at the service model for our itinerants to make sure it's balanced based on families of schools and ensuring that we can meet the service needs of each student.
And orientation mobility, I know that was a challenge before, has that been?
That is still a challenge. So we continue to need to repost for that position. We've posted, I think, 3 times this year, and it remains a challenge largely because of the schooling that is required in order to have an O&M is outside of the province.
Yeah.
So
It's
that,
coming to Ontario.
yes,
I mean, it's being developed over the summer. My understanding that's going to be starting in the fall of 2027, I think. At October.
okay,
Don't quote me on that on the college, but
that is fantastic. That's great.
Sorry, stupid question. Elena?
Orientation and mobility.
Okay.
So for example, just to put it very succinctly, helping them to navigate, students who are blind or low vision, helping them navigate spaces safely. It could be in community outside of our school buildings, it can be within the buildings. It's ensuring safe ability to traverse through different spaces.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, Charlotte?
Thank you. So I just wanted to echo what Allison was saying about that, around just what parents are hearing, and the kind of vague statements they're hearing. I think that increases a lot of anxiety and frustration with parents, especially with programs like this closing, because the option is either a small class placement or indirect support. And there's nothing else available or written in, so they have no idea what to expect for their child in a regular class placement. And I wonder if it's possible to have something created at the board level, whether it's guidelines or policy, that kind of clearly states how can we communicate more specifically to parents what they can expect, and how can we actually document this somewhere so that so that there's more transparency. And so that we know what's happening. So for example, let's say you have a child, whether they're starting JK or whether they're coming in an older grade from another school board and they're transitioning into the DDSB, and let's say they aren't toileted and they need support with that. And what they're going to be hearing from the school is, I don't know if we're gonna have any EA support for them because we don't know what the needs of the school are gonna be like. So we're gonna have to wait till September to find out. Going to the bathroom is a basic human right. That needs to be supported. So how can we somehow document for parents that they are going to be supported, and having a guideline so that all schools are being consistent with that, whether it's writing it as a goal into the IEP with a minimum of 4 times a day, they will be escorted to the washroom. And it's not just about the washroom, this is about several different things. It could be breaks from the classroom. If we aren't having this small class placement and the environment isn't working for the child, despite all of the accommodations we've tried, how can we guarantee that they're going to have a certain number of breaks outside of the classroom during the day to support their mental health and well-being? Whether that's written in as, I know this school board doesn't like to do direct support or withdrawal support, but those are options that could be documented on the IEP with like up to so many minutes a day of withdrawal support. Because I understand, you know, if you don't get a supply teacher for the day, things might be more difficult to meet like a minimum amount. But I feel like there needs to be some kind of documentation in place to increase transparency, to create that trust with families, because the way it is right now, it's very hard for families to trust that my child's not going to slip through the cracks. My child's not going to be holding their bladder all day because somebody didn't think they needed to be checked on or thought they were fine, or my child's going to soil themselves because nobody remembered to take them to the bathroom. So when we increase documentation and transparency, I feel like it creates that trust and helps support follow through.
Thank you.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I think what would be interesting is that I'm just thinking in terms of what we could bring back in September to the table for SEAC is our current transition documents, just to review and see if we want to revise and add additional layers of support. I think that would be interesting. Do you have a little sheet that we can? I'll just take that, and then I'm happy to bring that back for September if we wish. I also was thinking as you were talking, I know we were working previously on the pathways for parents. So we had the documentation around pathways for schools in terms of step 1, step 2, step 3. We're working on the pathways for parents and knowing what does that support look like at school, what can I expect? So I think if we build that into that process and then the transition work, the document alongside that, I think that would be a powerful next step.
I can't remember, Lauren, was there, in that kind of flow chart there, was there an option for when students are transitioning in? Because it seemed like it was more like starting the process, like if you don't have a diagnosis, this is the process to get a diagnosis and an identification. But is there a process for like, my kid already has an identification from another school board, they're coming in and they're gonna start here and then move through the process? Like that would be, if it doesn't already exist, that would be interesting and helpful, I think.
So
Yeah.
if I may, just to put it into the space that we have at this point gone through several iterations of that document, and the feedback from the table here provided a lot of the revisions that the document has now. Today, its most current iteration. We are currently having it reviewed as a next step by several internal departments to also get their feedback, and then we hope to bring it back relatively early in the new year to share back here. But specifically to your question, yes, what we heard at this table was that if I am a student in another board and I come here, that I should not have the feeling that I need to start right from the beginning of the process again. And so, thinking from like a cyclical approach and knowing where am I currently and what documentation am I already reading, that you're able to access it at that level, as opposed to having to go back right from the very beginning again. So, the document isn't finalized yet, but I think that the table here, will be pleased with the feedback, or sorry, what's the word I'm looking at? Seeing the feedback that was given and how it's actually coming alive in that document. So, yeah. And thank you to all those, like the team overall for the feedback you provided, and I know that there was some members gave like even more specific feedback, which was really helpful in that discussion.
Families, when regardless of the situation, whether they're transferring from another school or their child is starting kindergarten or they're continuing to a new grade, is it's a perception from families that my child is going to get so and so because we know that they need that, and it seems obvious that's going to happen, and I'm paying my taxes, so clearly it's going to happen. And then when it doesn't, or not in the way that they would like, so I hear you saying about, blindfold vision and hearing impaired students, they're gonna have vision itinerant or hearing itinerant. That itinerant comes once a month. See them for maybe a half an hour. That's like, as a parent, that's not what I'm thinking my child is going to receive. And so when that happens, back to Allison's point and to Sean's point, and then when you ask the questions and you inquire about it and you suggest things even, or say, this would be supportive and this would be supportive, and you're completely shut down. Well, that's not, our board doesn't do that, or we're not allowed to allow things from outside to come in and all of that. It's like, even just hearing these stories just for triggering me, as even though it's been several years since I've had to go through that. It's very, very challenging for parents to hear that messaging and to come across so many times flippantly. We just don't, this is the way it's done here. And, right, so I think and I think the processes are pretty much like what Sean is asking for is in place. It's about training staff, administrators, and special ed teachers to consider those aspects. So when the questions are being asked, how do we respond? If you don't have the information, then go to your administrator so that they can get that information before you respond to families and say, well, that's not gonna happen. That's not gonna be here. And well, that's how it is. We have, 15 kids in the board and only one vision itinerant. The parents don't, and I get it, it's a money thing. It's a money game. It's always gonna be a money game, but it's about people's hearts, right? And so when we use the word inclusive, it's about inclusive language and inclusive response and inclusive understanding.
Always a great subject of debate whenever we get to this part of the year. I will pass it over to our board reports then.
No, I was done.
Is she done?
Yes.
Okay,
We're on board reports.
we're on.
We're on board reports, done.
Okay, I brought all my materials so that, because the board has been kind of busy, as far as it's concerned. I think I mentioned the last time that we were launching, it has a community engagement policy, and so that policy was basically put up in the new basically community engagement portal, if you wish. But it's separate entity, so that anything that is coming up for community engagement, it's going to be there. And we received a lot of good feedback on that policy, and the policy was passed. We also had an information item at governance around social media use and the DDSB and the risks and the benefits
and considerations. There was no decision, but it was an information report, and it was really interesting to see as far as where the social media was used, and much of the social media is used when it comes to staff is to getting information out, but it's not really for dialogue where the interaction is there, and it's staff getting out to parents, but definitely not necessarily not our students per se. So it was an interesting report to read, and but we are waiting. And everybody has heard that the minister is looking at possibly a banning of cell phones and so forth. So we're waiting for what is going to happen there as well. But it was, it's an interesting read. It's available in the governance report as far as that's concerned. At standing, we had, and there was also, there was the revised school boundary, basically, policy as well, that was put out. And particularly we learned that, with, having to go through three new, school three new board school boundaries, but also, the, French immersion boundary review up in Uxbridge. So, we've learned a lot. LSE basically has come forward from that perspective, and we proved that. So, but at standing, we had a presentation by Yasmin Atwal, who is a basically a young person who presented, she has won an award, but she presented her National School Disability Inclusion Toolkit. So it was really interesting, but she basically talked about, inclusion is not just basically UDL and whatever, it's a whole way of developing a culture for inclusion. So, and it was kind of interesting because, this toolkit was kind of somewhat what, Standard Development Committee had talked about in one of their many recommendations. So I've got a copy here we can pass around. It's as far as what she has developed, and she presented it. She is presenting it to the UN, UN, basically in August, I believe, as well. Very impressive young lady. Let's see, gotta go through this step. Just to make sure I covered things. But we also had the annual report from the Parent Involvement Committee, which is also very impressive. But what was interesting, we talk about getting information out, and the Parent Involvement Committee basically had said that, still the way that parents like to receive information is in the newsletter. So, I think that, when we talk about moving things digitally, we still have parents. Number one communication is through emails and newsletters. So we have to be cognizant of that. And of course, we had the draft, a special education plan came. So trustees basically did have a few more comments on that. And then we had a report that came from Ignite Durham Foundation, which again, I think it's really, people should, would be interested in, because it was around the school food and nutrition survey, a summary report of regional findings. And, when you look at it, you see that 1 in 4 students basically have food security issues, and 1 in 5 students in the region basically have social economic security issues. It really is quite an interesting as far as and it also, as I said, has all the different municipalities and some you know, what is available, what is being provided. But I think if you look at, you know, both Ajax and Oshawa were the two ones that were highlighted as to demonstrating significant reliance on snack nutrition supports. In particular, Oshawa was just getting those supports as well. So it's a really, really good report available in the standing committee. And then, of course, we've had our budget meeting, and thank you, as again, Tara presented as well. We had QB to 18% and a parent / EA present about concerns about supports. And so the budget overview is there. What I can say is that, you know, I've gone through the technical documentation. And one of the issues I have around the budget, and it's not the board, trying to find my page that I'm really looking at, is around the special education funding, in that, overall, we've had a slight increase in the education funding envelopes. However, there's two areas that we actually, in the special education where we decreased significantly. And it has something to do with the stupid funding formulas. That's all I'll say. I shouldn't use that word. I know it's a bad word, but they're just nonsensical, because what people don't realize that it also takes into consideration of the whole province needs, and then depending on their needs shift, then your portion gets shifted as well. So it's proportionate to others. And it really is frustrating when you see that that's the way it's happening, and it's not clear in the documentation. And, you know, if you look at, you know, the budget overview, we talk about the increased sick leave, and I do understand when it comes to, we had a presentation, as I said, from QP, who talked about, you know, violence in the schools and you know, stress and people being leaving and so forth. But when you don't have the resources to give, you've done as much as you can. It's really, really frustrating. There is, you know, we are required to have an attendance management system. It was required by the ministry, so we've implemented that and so forth. But when you're looking at $27.2 million as far as basically which we're not getting funded for under the core education funding, that's huge. Statutory benefits, that's your CPP and EI that we are required to pay. And again, you're looking at, you know, $11.9 million there. And then, of course, the education development charge, which basically is the levy that is put on the building of new homes and buildings and so forth. And with the cap of $300, that we can increase the EDCs. And they're already not sufficient to purchase new lands, and we are going forward. So we have to borrow that money in order to purchase those lands. And so we're paying $9 million in interest annually on basically the money we have had to borrow to purchase the lands to continue to build the schools. And that also has a significant impact on our capital budget. So those are some of the things, and they say, well, that's all fine and good, but if you look at altogether, you know, 98.8% of our core funding is actually into the classrooms, 96% into the classrooms. It's in for students, directly supporting students. That doesn't give you a lot to move around as far as that's concerned. As well as I also look at, that is kind I mentioned there, but basically costs of fuel and, you know, hydro, your again, we only receive about 2% an increase. And we already know that there's a possibility, we're still waiting, thank goodness for the School Board Energy Coalition. But, Oshawa is looking anywhere between 10% increase unless that is negotiated. And we have to find the money somewhere. We can't go back to the ministry and say, hey, because we've already said that. We've already written, the board has written a letter to the minister saying this is an issue. And it really concerns me when you hear in the newspaper, and so I'm not misquoting anything, but the minister has also stood up and during question period and saying that, we've given X, $1 million of money around special education, but I don't see it in the student achievement. And I until I see changes in the student achievement, I can't see giving more money. And so, it's really frustrating to hear those types of comments because we know that this school board has worked very hard to improve student achievement, and yet the funding model, if they do improve more than level 2, that funding model also penalizes boards that actually improve student achievement. So it's very, very frustrating when you hear that. We have, staff had gone through quite a bit and, there has been reductions. And looked at the best place across the board in order to cover, because overall, the money received under core education funding was a 1.5% increase. That's it. So, everybody around the table knows what it's like, just the cost of living and the way things have increased. And we're not getting the funds from the school, so.
I just wanted to add to that point of also that when it comes to even some boards for certain programs, they're not long-term, or they're given just for a year, or or the envelopes are only used for a specific thing. So if they're not used, you can't use them for other things. And it's very frustrating because the need is still growing, but it's not matching in terms of what's coming in. And I know, because I speak to the director and I know, but there's a lot of movement that happens to make other things happen, but it's unusual. We're just doing what we can in our board. But a lot of times as Donna said, they do get penalized for, in other words, they really track those dollars, but we're not getting the dollars that we need for those other programs. So when parents ask me, are your schools getting funding? We're not getting those funding in our core budget, our core funds. So it's not necessarily just there. And those other funds have to be approved. And sometimes our staff don't know when we are going to get those funds. So it makes everything kind of like borrowing Peter to pay Paul, whatever.
Yeah.
So
And what Kelly's talking about is your REP, the Responsive Education Program funding. And last school year, we got a 25-page document that talked about all the REPs that were available. Some of them you boards had to apply. This year, for this budget, we still haven't got that information. So as Kelly says, you can't rely on that. You have to put a budget in that where where your income is coming. You can't rely on the REPs because you don't know if you're going to get it. And there has been times within the budget where at the beginning, they say, oh, yes, this is available. And then partway through the year, they say, oh, no, we're not going to give that. That has happened. And this board is very good at, basically our staff are phenomenal really at identifying that maybe we shouldn't count on this one because, this is the history of it, right? So, they are very good. And and the way things are presented as well, as everybody knows, the $750 that the teachers are going to be getting for school supplies. Well, it's not $750 new dollars. 450 is, but the other 300 is, it's out of the school supply, basically the budget that we currently get. So it's not all new money. And so it's how you fix the words. The last thing I want to say is that, I gone through this, is that the budget, we have, when they release the technical paper, they also release a summary of all school boards across the province. And in 2022, 23, the FOA office, the Financial Accountability Office, FAO, whatever, office released as far as where boards sat for the amount of core education funding per pupil in the boards. And Durham actually sits as the third lowest in the province in 22-23. Well, we have the esteemed pleasure of being now the second lowest in the province. We only outbeat for the lowest funding is the Halton Catholic School Board. Previously, the Halton Catholic and Halton Public were lower than us. Well, now we are the second. And as far, or we could have said we're the second lowest public, English public school board, but now we're the second in the province. So, you know, and people keep on saying, well, you know, you do receive funding. Yes, the model, and this is where we talk about, everybody receives funding based on a model. So we're not, get equal funding, but it's not equitable. It's as simple as that. And so what this board does do is unbelievable. And then the last thing is I would like to say is that, again, with the regulatory changes that this government it has done, is that, and I'm not saying this is going to happen here, for sure, I know it's not going to happen here, but even if we were to complain and say, no, we're going to do something, the ministry now has any possibility they will take over a board. So, you know, I'm quite confident that, you know, this budget is going to pass. And so forth. We still like comments on it. If you see anything, you know, as far as that's concerned, but staff have worked really, really hard to put this together. We have our next 5 minutes meeting on Monday, so that it can go to the board on the 15th of June. And because they have not changed any of the deadlines, even though they just gave us whatever they gave us, the core education funding. Oh, that's a lot, but anyways, that's the budget, and it's all, as the summary is there. What's there?
Questions, comments? Okay, thank you, Donna, appreciate the time, so it's good to see you, Ms. J. On to our presentations.
Fatima, that's you.
That's me. I thought that was me. Hi, I'm Fatima Beauregard, Manager of Speech and Language Services. I'm back again with some updates on augmentative communication following the March meeting. So at the March meeting, if you remember, you gave me some really great feedback. You walked around and put feedback on the big white pages. And so took all of that in, went back to our department, and so I'll go through some slides on where we're at now, and also I think you got electronically family guidelines for augmentative communication. So we'll also kind of touch on that as well.
Ready, Joe? Thanks.
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, it's
It was
so
just-
tiny. I can, okay, I'll say those little pieces, but it's fine. So I'm just gonna give you a bit of an update. So when I first started, say 2 years ago, and AAC was something that I really wanted to build and grow here. So the first year was on building that learning library of augmentative communication tools. So we did that. We've got our low tech, mid tech, high tech. So now this year was, you know, what can we continue to do to build upon those pieces? And so peer inclusion and engagement resources was one area you highlighted, and something that was also really important to us. And so we started to look into how can we bring peers into this process, knowing that peer involvement is so necessary to support engagement and participation and access. And I think when you talk about inclusion as well, if you start with those peers, you're really laying that culture of acceptance and awareness for everyone, starting at the beginning. So it just becomes part of, not an add-on. And there is some research behind that, just in the little pieces there, but that we know that peers can be successfully trained to use AAC strategies, and they do. We know that peer modeling really increases expressive communication. It lays that foundation for peers to be able to engage with each other socially. And so we get that more inclusion, less social isolation, and just improved inclusion in the classroom culture as a whole. We know that this aligns with our multi-strategic plan and also the new kindergarten curriculum. Strand D is belonging and contributing. And so it's really timely and important. And so one of my colleagues at Thames Valley District School Board has started this year a pilot on a program to increase peer inclusion in kindergarten. And I was talking to her. I had her come and speak to our department about their preliminary sort of findings of what they were doing, and included some members of teaching and learning in early years. And everybody's really excited about the program there. And so it's something that our plan is to kind of this summer, really put some effort into developing a program so that we can go out into classrooms in the 26-27 school year, and hopefully, get some more peer engagement with augmentative communication. That's one piece. The second was on training, was another piece you highlighted as system training and how much training is being done. So we did offer just an update from the time that we saw you, April 17th, that day. We've sort of shifted some of our professional development to really incorporate more inclusive language and really think about changing the environment to support inclusion and fostering connection, to have more of that connection piece rather than compliance around augmentative communication. And so we did that across the system on the 17th, which we got about 200 EAs and educators across the system. And then we partnered with early years, and I was involved in some administrator sessions for kindergarten. It was actually really cool. They had pretend classrooms sort of set up. It was really neat. And so what I did was embed augmentative communication into it so they could see how you can actually start your classroom setup, having it there. Once again, not an add-on, but something that we proactively think about beforehand and that's in the environment. So that it's just accessible to all learners, and all learners see AAC as just another way of communicating as part of that multimodal communication piece. And that was a hit, if I have to say. So people asked about it. I ended up giving administrators just templates of core boards and theme displays that they could then pass on to their kindergarten teachers. So I think that was really well received. And we also have as our own SLP group, we do ongoing professional development, and we do have some at the end of June from actually a school-based SLP in Winnipeg to talk about AAC implementation in schools. Wanted something kind of Canadian focused. It's actually hard to find school-based and Canadian together. So looking forward to that. And then the next piece, indoor and outdoor communication boards. We talked about that as well. So started the conversation with facilities to start the process for creating and distributing outdoor communication boards. And what we're looking at, our hope is to start with a base of one outdoor board for the kindergarten yard, and then one, and then one for the larger schoolyard. And so we're in the process. I'll show you, there's a picture of our template coming up, but we've got like a template for the outdoor board. So if you go to the next one, I'll show you. So we have worked with, actually that SLP in Winnipeg, helped us out with what they've put in their school district, and they had a really big move towards it. And it's really hard to see, but there's, in that little blank box would be like a little QR code that you could, even if families were using the playground, that you could go to that would tell you what the board is, tips for using it, what modeling is about. And we worked with early years too, and to come up with what vocabulary we thought would be really important in the kindergarten yard. So we got some feedback from them, and we looked at yards, different ones. KPR has some out as well. So we did some comparisons of what was out at different playgrounds, and have come up with that sort of template for it. So looking forward to next steps. We'll keep you up to date. Let's see how things are rolling out with that. And then we like to do some indoor events. And then today at the abilities meet. So last year when I volunteered for the first time at the abilities meet here, I realized it was really hard to hear anything. And there were no visual supports available. So this year we made some visual supports for staff to use. And right away, when I was there this morning, a couple parents gave feedback because I know it's really small to see, but there were visual instructions. Each Blackboard had visual instructions for each event so that the guides at the event, the coaches there, they could hold it up and pair their verbal with the visual as they were going through the instructions. And then we had a core board at each event so that they could also refer to that. And so educators and parents alike noticed right away, and it went on really well. So that was really good today. It was like so nice to see. And then I think this is my last piece, right? Is just alternative assessment measures. So that's something that's come up a lot with Acadians about what do our minimally speaking and non-speaking students, how can we truly assess their abilities in literacy when those tests aren't really made for them. And so I've been busy kind of gathering information from other school boards and Bloorview with regards to what are you using as alternative assessment measures out there in the system, and actually going to go visit Bloorview, I think now June 17th, I said next week, but I think it's been pushed a week, to meet with some of the educators there and gather information on the tool that they're using, because we're allowed to adapt their tool. So what we'll do is kind of adapt and make our own DDSB alternative assessment tool after we've met with them and figure out the best way, spoken to Innovative Ed about, what's the best format for that here. So we're also working on that with the hope of getting that out in the fall so that educators have a different tool to use for those students. And lastly, the draft guidelines. So we've been working on those as well. So we had input from you around what you wanted included in draft guidelines for families, and that was shared with you electronically. There were also some appendices in there just about what we've been using in terms of checklists and how we gather information on what's in a student system, and then tried to put not the best with that kind of stuff. Canva is not my friend, I would say after today, but trying really hard. Yes, isn't it? It's hard. I think but there's a flow chart in there as well to try to make it simple about what the steps actually would be along the pathway. So if I hope you had a chance to have a look at it. If you hadn't had a chance to look at it, and you want to provide us with some feedback, or if you have any additional questions, you can send them to Lisa, and we can have a look at that. I think Lisa said by Monday if possible, and then we will continue to move forward with that piece.
Any questions? I'm gonna pick on Lyle because this is his forte. If you've got any questions, I'll give you first pick. No.
This is my forte. I don't know if it's my forte, but it's interesting work. I think, there's, with the advent of AI, I heard your hesitation with Canva, so please forgive me if I'm getting too technical, but with the advent of AI, there's a lot of work being done in the AAC arena, and I was curious what the team is doing in that space to support communication with youngsters.
So what was interesting is that was part of the April 17th PD, and I would say it was learning for our team too. There was an AI component, but we used it to sort of generate prompts of how you could help educators to model. So we used the AI prompt we were using and we demonstrated for staff was, this is the vocabulary that this student is currently kind of working on. So within this activity, highlight how you would model that using aided language stimulation. And what was interesting was AI did recognize aided language stimulation as a strategy. And it gave really great, almost like scripts. And we said, you could use this for a supply teacher or an EA that's never used it before. It actually gave like little scripts and said, okay, now you point here. So I think it's got some really good possibilities. I've got to explore it some more, but that was one way that we had tried to use it to sort of support people with their training, because that's, I feel, like the biggest barrier is people actually using it and feeling like they can model. And how do we get over that barrier?
Yeah, and I think, you know, sometimes we can get in ruts with certain strategies and certain types of technology, and there's a whole world of support for people who have AAC related accommodation needs. And so I'm hopeful that the team is able to sort of communicate that to educators and get these supports to our young people. But great work. Thank you so much. Cheers.
John. So I was really happy reading the slides that you sent ahead of time. I thought it sounded really positive. I just had some I guess curiosities about some of the details there. So you talked about the rolling out this kindergarten program, which sounds amazing. Are you planning to start with like a group of schools or classes, and how many were you thinking of, or is it rolling out like we're gonna just roll this out across the board?
Well, so far, I've had some educators come and ask, the ones that, so some of the facilitators for teaching and learning attended the session and said, I volunteer for you to come into my classroom next year. But yeah, I think I'd like to start with a small pilot just to see, okay, how is this being received and feedback, and then offer it up as an item that we would offer to all classrooms. I think something that we got as feedback was Thames Valley was only using it in classrooms where there was an existing student with a tool, and the feedback our team had said is, why wouldn't we just offer it to everyone? Because I'm sure there's multiple students in the school that would have the tool. So that was one piece. But yeah, so I haven't decided on exactly how many or where, but
Awesome.
Kelly.
This was great and wonderful. I just wanted to know, in terms of the actual use of the AAC device, I've noticed like for some students, like in their schools, they have like specific, like word or vocabulary already built in, but there are times where, they may want to request something else, or the images are there, but the voice, part of it is not active. Is there a way to make it easier for parents or maybe a teacher or staff that can just add the information in as they see it? So if they're a child is trying to request something, but the voice isn't there, or they want to find another image to represent what the child is asking for, is there a way to do that much easier?
it depends. This isn't it depends answer.
Yeah, that's okay.
Well, because there's so many different software apps. So there isn't one app, but what we do is we do train the staff on how to do that piece, and there are instruction sheets, and our AAC, there's an SLP that we have that focuses on this. She's even made videos. So, but every time you encounter new software, it's a new learning curve to do it. But yes, we do teach people how to do that so that they can then go and do it on their own.
Right.
Because the SLP isn't always going to be there to put in a new word if you're working on it, if something comes up.
And the reason why I ask is because, for example, if a child is going from, say, like school to therapy, and then they're using the same device all day, but then the person may not. So that I just want to understand how, but it's something that would be specific to that program, like of that base AAC, and then that staff so they would initially share the instructions with whoever's.
Yeah. And I think we've also had conversations where it's important to communicate between all parties.
Right.
Who's responsible for updating, because if you have multiple hands in it too, the vocabulary can go to weird places, and it's like, you want to make sure that it's consistent. So in cases like that, we've sort of had a meeting deciding, okay, is it the parent that's in charge of doing this so that it remains consistent, or is it the school staff, or is it like who's going to take primary responsibility for updating the vocabulary?
Yes, I think it's really important because I can see the frustration of a child wanting something else and it's not accessible because it's not in the images, and very frustrating.
We also teach them alternative ways to do it, because not every word is always going to be in there. So it's also teaching them some flexibility about what do you do, how do you find a synonym or something close to.
Right, like sentences versus.
Yes.
saying.
So I have a couple quick follow-up questions, if that's okay. So in the classroom, in the kindergarten classrooms that you're doing the pilot in, will they also have like a bigger communication board that the peers can access as well? Awesome. And then I wondered, as we're talking about this earlier, is there a possibility, or have you looked into it, of partnering with, Grandview with their entry to school program to kind of support the rollout of this program as they're already in so many kindergarten classes?
I haven't, because this was sort of brand new. We had our Thames Valley came to speak to us, I think, maybe 2 weeks ago. But I'm in contact with Ashley Rego, their manager, quite often. So yeah, it's something I can definitely reach out and talk to her about over the summer.
Yeah, I wonder if that would just like facilitate
Yeah, because
the
we've talked
rollout
about,
and the consistency across the different programs and even like resource creation for the program, if they would, I don't know that they would support with it, but I've seen them really look for community partnerships and
yeah,
stuff.
and Ashley and I've talked about consistency in visuals already and how we can sort of facilitate that. So that kind of worked well this year, and how we're approaching it and what visuals we're using, but yeah.
Awesome. And then, sorry, a quick little last one. You talked about the core boards on the playgrounds, the kindergarten playground and the regular playground. Is that rolling out across all schools at the same time, or is it starting with a small pilot
No,
program?
facilities, I think, and Lauren can help me out with this, I think that's a funding thing, so I think the rollout will go out slowly, depending on funding.
Okay.
So they're in the process right now of like pricing this, and then once we have prices from manufacturers or whatever we want to call them, the printing people, then we'll have a better idea of how many we could roll out at a time. But yes, she was just in the process of getting quotes.
I'm gonna, one more, no, go ahead, but I think we're getting way over time, so I need to get people home at some point, so last question.
I just wanna say the UDL that you're, I think is amazing, that's fine, but that is true UDL, what you're talking about. I love that you're doing it with, not targeting schools or classrooms that have students that have a need for it, but just those educators who are open to having it, which I think is amazing. And I think you need to really think about documenting everything that's happening, because I see this being something that needs to be shared out to other boards, to other systems. So the researcher part of me kind of says like, oh my goodness, we need to like connect with somebody who can do the writing around this to share what you're doing, because I think it's incredibly powerful.
Thank you, and thanks for the feedback. Because that did help drive, sort of put everything together. Yeah.
Like, I'm just even thinking how this will change how everybody in the school, students, parents will see it when they see that board outside of recess. Or when they're dropping their kids off, like. That will just break down so many barriers and stereotypes and biases that we naturally carry. I think it's amazing.
Just think how that can extrapolate outside the school system.
Absolutely.
Community parks.
Absolutely.
Mall.
That's what I'm saying, it needs to be like, really, really document everything that you're doing and how it's rolling out and what people are saying about it. It's because something that needs to be shared out. I can see people wanting to write about that. If I had time, it would be me. And research stuff already.
Okay, I dropped
That's my fault.
That was amazing. Thank you very much for that. I think this has been something we had similar conversations at different previous meetings about communication boards, like in gyms and that sort of thing. So this is fantastic to kind of sort of see it tangibly showing up. So
Yes, hopefully I have more to share with you in the fall, something tangible.
great.
Yeah.
Look forward to having you back, having you come back and give us an update on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Yes, please. Have a good night. I don't even know where we are. We're here somewhere. Number 9, business arising from the minutes.
So, sorry,
Yes, please go.
please go.
Go.
Sharing with you at a previous meeting, you asked if we could bring back data around exceptionalities, number of exceptionalities in the system. So I just wanted to sort of give a quick overview of what we presented with you for you today.
interesting data that as a system, we're going to look much deeper into the why behind what we're seeing. Shauna asked some extremely good questions about the data that was present. So I'll let her sort of share her thinking once we go through it just quickly here. But what you're looking at the top, what you had that was shared out with you was first of all, numbers that you see in terms of number of students based on exceptionality. And then below that, you'll see that based on percentages. So I just wanted to, it's a little easier to see the trends within the percentages. What I do want to highlight is if you look, there were some years in our system where we had huge increases in number of students. So we had years where, 8,000 students arrived that one particular year, which it does affect the data. And so you'll see that as we go through it. So if you could go to the next slide, please, Joe, we'll just go quickly through what you're seeing. Oh, and I also just wanted to clarify the exceptionalities for you. It's a little confusing. So the ministry outlines the following exceptionalities. So you have behavior, and then you have communication. Within communication, we broke it out for you so you could see it, but ministry will say one of the exceptionalities is communication. We have under that is autism, deaf, hard of hearing, language impairment, speech impairment, learning disability. And so when we're looking at those, we broke them apart for you so you can see it. Under intellectual, we have gifted, and then mild intellectual difficulty, and then developmental disability. So you'll see those. And then physical, we have a blind, low vision, and multiple exceptionalities. So I was talking earlier, and multiple exceptionalities is tricky because kids can have dual diagnoses and it will get grouped under multi-exceptionality. And so we pulled it by primary exceptionality, but we do have to pull that in further. We're gonna have to explore that a little deeper. And so that's something that we can do with the data as we move forward. But as you can see, I just want to caution us a little bit. The bottom of the scale is not a 0. We intentionally graded the scale to be very clear for you, but it's a bit dramatic. So when you look at this particular graph, you can see that in 2018, there was 1,362 students with a behavior exceptionality identification. And all the way up at the top of the scale, it's 1,688. So just over 300. So it does look a little skewed because it seems quite significant. The numbers are not as large as they look based on the chart. So just know that it doesn't start at 0. And what you're looking at the top, the green and the pink, the reddish color there is basically an increase or decrease by year. So the green represents an increase in number of students with the exceptionality, and the pink is the decrease. So it gives us a bit of a trend over time. So behavior exceptionality there. And then next, if you could turn, Joe, is autism. So lowest end of the scale here is 1,571, and then higher range is 2,238, but a general trend upwards year over year. And deaf, hard of hearing, very specific to individual student needs. So numbers tend to fluctuate quite differently over time, but you can see there that the range in numbers is quite a bit lower than the other graphs, although it looks quite dramatic. Not as much of a shift in numbers. And language impairment is our next one. So you can see trends over time through that. Now, what is really interesting, and I just want to point out for us, is COVID is also very much affecting this data. So when you look at it, you can see that the 2019-2020 is the second one on the graph, is the year that we went out of school in March break. So that's a pretty typical year, but when you hit the 2020 and the 2021, we had lots of students not at school and parents not necessarily interested in having their child assessed or looking at having them work alongside to have an exceptionality or an IEP created. So you can see that absolutely we can see that trend in the data, and it's quite significant. And so it may be interesting to look at data a little further back before this data to see what it looked like pre-COVID. And then, so we went back to 2018, but I'm actually very much interested in seeing what it looked like before, now that we have this data. So that's language impairment. Again, so then learning disability is our next one. You have a general trending downward from 2018 till now. And that's a very interesting sort of trend, and there was a conversation with Shauna that she said some really good questions around what would be causing that downward, and what is the relationship between the data that you see on the screen and the number of assessments that have been done within school. So that was an interesting story. I'm giving away your questions. I'll let you address those. But as you can see, a general trend downward of about just about 1,000 students over time. And then speech impairment. So under communications, again, numbers are quite low of students in this particular graph. So the range is quite small. So not much of a change in terms of students there. Gifted is the next one. And what I just want to, I added this because I think the gifted data is a bit confusing unless you. So I want to just, we'll look at AG Bell at the top. And so what you're looking at in 2018, 2019 is 157 students at AG Bell were in the gifted special education class. And then you can see the next year it was pretty similar. And then we see what happened with COVID, right? So kids weren't doing gifted assessments necessarily. We did them, but not all families wanted to have the kids come into the space to do that. So if you look at any school that you see there, we had a significant drop in the gifted identification in 2020, 2021. And then we see an upward trend following that. That goes up to where we are now in 2025, 2026. So what you're looking at is the number of students who are actually sitting in gifted special education classes. What's interesting is the number of CCATs. So remember, we looked at previous meetings, we looked at CCAT numbers. The number of CCATs that we have done has actually decreased over time. Yet the numbers have increased significantly. So I think that's it's hard because when you first look at the data, you think, well, you'll see it in a second and you'll be like, what happened there? But so I just want to help us understand why the data looks the way it does. So if you can switch to the next slide, Joe. So what we're seeing is gifted data from 2018. So we had 1,658 students with a gifted exceptionality. We dropped the next year, just about 100, and then COVID hits. So we're not doing the gifted assessments. And so we have a lower number of students into 2021, 2022. And then we come out of COVID and our numbers start to increase again. So that's an interesting pattern. And you can see that very clearly in the data that's presented there. And then MID, mild intellectual ability, is there trending as a slight trend upward, but generally downwards. Again, further, I think it's going to be really interesting. One of the things that we're doing as a system is we're creating an inclusive student services dashboard so that we can access this data real time. So this is something that right now, if I want to access that data, I visit our analytics person who pulls the data for me and have an opportunity to go through it and analyze it. But what we're going to create is a dashboard that we can access that real time, so we can see changes in exceptionality from year over year, and honestly, just for month to month. So it'll be interesting to have access to that data at our fingertips. But a general trend downward there as well, and then also developmental disability. Our next one is a general trend downward over time. And physical disability, you're seeing a similar trend. We had, again, the numbers here are quite small, so it does look quite dramatic, but it's really not a lot of kids that make that shift. And then multiple exceptionality is interesting. And so I think what it speaks to is the complexity of the needs of the students in our system over time. So a multiple exceptionality would be students who have a dual diagnosis or multiple diagnoses within that. And so, as I said, we did try to pull based on primary exceptionality. And so we can, I believe in conversation, we can pull out, I was talking about it the other day, and she said the same thing. It'd be really interesting for us to pull the data and separate that data to see what sits within the multiple exceptionality. And I believe we can do that. So we're just working on doing that now. So definitely further work that needs to be done. The data tell the story. We can see some of the stories in the data, but now the real work is why, what's driving that data, and what, as Shauna, her great question to me was, so if we put those two things together provincially, sorry, do you want me to let you do it, Shauna, or? I'll let you, they were great questions. You go ahead, I'll let you do.
Sure, thanks. So I think, I'm gonna go out of order here, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I think when I look at the numbers, the thing that jumped out at me is that in several areas, it's what you, when I saw the drop and then it coming back up, I'm like, okay, it's on COVID, that makes sense. Why it went down and then it's gradually coming back, and that's what I would expect in most areas. What concerns me is that some of those areas, we aren't seeing that, and it's actually significantly reduced over what it was pre-COVID, and with our board enrollment increasing, that doesn't track, that doesn't make any sense. And my question, I guess, is to look for some additional data to say, is there something else that can explain this, for example? I think one of the ones was a language impairment. Is that now maybe children who were previously being diagnosed with that are now being diagnosed with autism? Maybe that might explain it, or they may be being diagnosed with a learning disability and maybe language impairment isn't as common of a diagnosis anymore. But I don't know that the numbers really track because our learning disability numbers are dropping so significantly. And what worries me is, I don't know, when I look at numbers for things like autism, those actually, that was one of the only areas I think that didn't drop during COVID. And the reason for that occurs to me is that physicians can diagnose autism. Physicians are not diagnosing learning disabilities. They don't do the testing for that. Psychologists do. And the only way many families can access a psychological assessment, because it's very expensive, is through the school board. So if we've missed out on opportunities during COVID and then we aren't increasing the availability of testing for these children, we're having a large number of children who are falling through the gaps without a diagnosis, without access to supports that they need in order to be successful, not just in elementary and secondary school, but also in post-secondary school as well, because if you don't have a diagnosis, you're not going to receive accommodations at the post-secondary level. I guess my other question around it is it reflecting actual diagnoses or IPRC numbers?
IPRC numbers.
So then,
Yeah.
the other thing that I've brought up in past meetings is a concern that I've heard from many families across the board is there seems to be this kind of standard language that's been used that I've heard from many families in different areas of the board around families don't need an IPRC. So this general discouragement of families going through the IPRC process. And I wonder if that's partly explaining it, which I would disagree with that. I don't think that that should be happening. But I wonder if that's a possible explanation then, if is it the diagnoses are going down or is it the IPRCs are going down, and looking at the data of which kids have an informal IEP and they have a diagnosis, and which kids have a diagnosis and no IEP, and comparing that to the data that we have. And I'd also want to look at some data for the number of psych assessments year to year to compare with this. So are we doing less psych assessments now than we were in 2018? Or are we doing less per capita, like as our population has increased? So what is the percentage? Or the ratio that we're doing now compared to then?
Yeah, we can include SLP assessments in there too, so that's important as well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I think. Yes, and then I wondered about, but I think multiple exceptionality, if I remember the numbers, like it doesn't look like it's significantly increased to explain the discrepancy in the data. It looks like it's tracking on like a steady trajectory. So I wondered about that too. Like, are some things, maybe it used to be a learning disability and now they have a secondary identification, so it's being called a multiple exceptionality. I don't know. Yeah.
I really liked you had mentioned about cross-referencing with provincial data, which I think would be really interesting to do. So that was a great suggestion.
Awesome.
I'm just confused by the category of physical disabilities. So I think you said vision of low vision impairment or vision falls under physical disability.
It does.
And so what else constitutes physical disability? I just wondered whether there was not value in breaking that down as well. I think it would be
Yeah.
good to know mobility versus
Yeah.
blind, low vision kind of those specific numbers.
Pull out the, okay.
Mhm.
We can, yeah, I think we can. I will certainly find that out. Awesome, thank you. If I can bring that. Questions? Oh, Lyle.
Lyle, do you have one?
Yeah, amazing data. I really appreciate this. Thank you for sharing it with us. A couple thoughts came to me was around, like, it's interesting that the LD numbers kind of track with post-secondary. Right? I'm at the post-secondary level, and we've seen a steady dip in LD as well. And I want to believe that whatever we're doing is working, right? The accommodations are integrated, universally designed, but I know that can't be the case. And I know these students aren't disappearing. They exist, and these conditions exist, and the need for these students to have accommodations exists. So it's fascinating, the dip. And the point was so salient about accessing psych ed assessments and the exorbitant costs that's associated with them. And so that absolutely could be one reason. But I would love the research team to dive deeper into what's happening, particularly there. Another thing that's really curious to me is this unique to this school board, or are you seeing this across? Can the research team examine this across other boards to see if there's similar trends? And then the third piece around comorbidity or the secondary, tertiary disabilities, I'd be curious to know if it's all documentation based assessments, so meaning the person is diagnosed with multiple disabilities, or is it through a lived experience that it's being counted for? Because if that's the case, then the data might be slightly skewed and you might want to pay more attention to the primary disability.
I can answer that, Lyle. So in here, it's based on diagnosis.
Diagnosis. Okay, thank you.
Questions? One other thing I'll just add quickly. What's interesting, Lyle, just when you talk about universal design and access, what I can tell you is we started the work in UDL in this is our third year. So go back 3 years, which is interesting because that's one of the things I looked at, 'cause I was curious to know, has there been any shifts since we started the work? I know we're quite early in the work, but I was curious to know if that was, you could see that in the data. So I just wanted to share that because I thought it was interesting.
Helen.
Let's finish. I was just wondering just about that. Is it possible that there are a number of students that are getting some supports regardless, but not having an identified or diagnosed learning disability because of maybe some of the practices that have been included throughout the system in terms of in-class support? So I know that a lot of parents sometimes are hesitant because some areas are supported with the changes in the curriculum and some things, but they haven't had an actual diagnosis, maybe even from the earlier years. So like from kindergarten to K to 6. Is that possible? Like they may have not been just getting identified.
It's 100% possible. I would say it's a family choice to whether or not you want to have your child assessed or not. And so I think we have lots of families who choose that, and there's others who don't. And I think teachers are responsive to they need to be responsive to the individual needs of the student. And so do we have situations where we have supports in classrooms and there's no identification? Absolutely we do. Do we have, and vice versa, right? There's lots of classes with students with identifications with support. So it really depends on the individual student and the needs of that particular student and how they get support at the school. So, but absolutely, yes.
Then moving on to number 10, association reports, and community reports. We have several. There's, since when I was here, there's the Ontario Autism Coalition Special Education Survey. It's very lovely. Did Sensa have any specific stuff that changed? It's really last week. So she has to wait to this. Okay, and now she can't come to. Okay. I didn't get a chance. I couldn't even begin to speak for her. On this, but there's a lot of data in here just in terms of survey populations and other things that they found, so it's. Oh lordy, it's a lot of words, so yeah, and including IEP plans, and it's very comprehensive, so maybe what we do is push it all then, so that since we're now has a chance to be able to. I'll leave it proposal, because this looks like it should be shared. It's there, the data, in there. So feel free to look at it, it is 65 pages long. Just FYI. We also have the 2 items from. Yes, this,
And I don't care.
Thank you.
Yeah. See, I thought the circular was long at 15 pages. Yes, there is the LDAO, the provincial level SEAC circular has been put out for information. And there's kind of 4 main topics. The Auditor General's report on special education, education funding for school boards, Bill 101, and transition to post-secondary. And I think all of those things have come up around this table. Even tonight, we've heard some comments on all of these things. So don't need to say very much more. We've heard the main points of concern. If there's more in there, if anybody feels like they want to have a look at the specific talking points from LDAO. But the other part was the Roy Cooper Memorial Scholarship Award, also provincial level, but it's a $1,000 scholarship award for a student with LD who will be pursuing a Bachelor of Engineering or Bachelor of Science in Physical Sciences discipline. So applications are being accepted for that. Please pass on the information if there's any students that you think might be eligible. The applications are due by Friday, June 26th at 4 p.m. to your local chapter. Any questions for those? Yep, Donna.
Not so much a question, just on a comment, because I know I did read, comments around the auditor's report. And it's been really interesting as well, because the number of parents that have now called me around the IPRC and their IEPs, and quoting the Auditor General's report has been very interesting, because obviously it had had a huge impact as far as people are reading it. So it is out there. And so that was one of the comments I had made when it came to the special education plan as well, particularly around the IEP process and the IPRC process. As far as some of the comments there, making sure that we address some of the points that have come forward. But yeah.
Mine wasn't a question, it was a 5-second comment about Easter seals. If I keep it under 5 seconds.
I'll allow it because it's you.
Thank you. It's just, if you're wearing red, don't run out the door. Let me take a picture if you will, because yesterday was Red Shirt Day.
Yeah,
thank you.
it was Rich. All right, moving on to correspondence. A couple of things going on. We have a letter from Eastern Seals Ontario with nomination for a new alternate. I'm reading all the glasses. Pardon me. That's better. So nice. Olivia is leaving the position of alternate and putting forth the nomination for the new alternate. Meets all requirements, etc. Looking forward to hearing from us. Any questions or concerns with the change in alternate member? Yes, I'm fine. So I'm waiting for your comments.
Okay.
So since there doesn't seem to be any discussion about the thing, can I get a motion to nominate Nicole as the new alternate member for Easter Seals?
Recommend to the board.
Recommend to the board, let
trustees.
them make the pick, yes. They got a motion. Allison, second. Shauna, all in favor? Motion passes. Thank you.
And we'll try to get that right into the June package so that it gets approved, so that they can start in September.
Yeah.
Right, as the alternate.
Yes, that would be. All right, and the second one was from the Upper Grand District School Board. SEAC. So funding. Same things. Interministerial wraparounds, that's not one we've heard in a while. As for the call for increased funding for our community partners, care and treatment education partners, different child benefit services. I think there's a health association. Special incidents, proportion sustainability. So again, it's a lot of the same. We've had many conversations as well around the table. Anyone have anything else to add? Donna?
More of a comment as far as process, because I know that we had mentioned that, that we will continue to advocate to the Ministry Advisory Committee of Special Education. For your information, there are 13 vacancies right now, and they have not been filled on the Ministry Advisory Committee of Special Education. And they also have not met for over a year and a half now. So we are writing letters to a committee, which we're supposed to do, apparently. We're not supposed to write, according to the edit, we're not supposed to write directly to the minister. But here is a committee that is mandatory under the Education Act, that they have this advisory board, provincial advisory board. They're not appointing, and they haven't met for a year and a half. And so, the last time I pointed that out, but I had an application in for vaccine, let's just say I was turned down. So, anyways, I find it really disturbing that, again, when it comes to getting public, comments and advisory, parent voice, it's not being heard. And that, as I said, so that's really, really frustrating when it comes to, we put this and just like, no, it's going into a file and it's not being heard or seen because they are not meeting. I'm sorry, I seem to be a really downer. I think I should get, I really apologize. I was saying to Elton, I said, much better, the speech language was much better presentation because it was more happy. I'm sorry, but.
I want to know if during the summer, since this is our last meeting, correct? If we're able to share information, to the committee, like about any community events regarding like special education, or are we able to do that? To have share any emails past the time we're off in summer? Like communication?
I don't see one.
Because there are some programs and camps coming up, and I wanted to share that information through the emails. So so people can register early. If they have children with special needs or not special needs, they can register for the camps that are offered in some of the towns.
Sure, thank you.
Item number 12, community concerns. I don't think we have any community concerns raised this month. All right, on to celebrations and successes. Anybody have any celebrations or successes to share? Ta-da!
I just say, actually, I had there was a soccer tournament that was held at, basically at, Victoria Fields, and it was basically, a women's soccer league that they always designate this tournament, and the proceeds go to a charity. And the charity, what happened to be the Durham Down Syndrome Association. And so, but Victoria, and we shared, the booth with the Durham Down Syndrome Association, but Victoria was selling her rabbits and snowmen and stuff, as well, that she makes the, sock gnomes. And we had a really, really good time, and she's actually, sold 11 of them there, because it was really a small, which was really cool. So today I actually went, and Ajax Markets has just opened up. So we're looking at maybe having we're gonna try it out, a booth at the Ajax Markets, to basically sell some of her crafts, because she has, said she's also done clothespin wreaths that she does, various themes. And so we're looking out as far as being, talk about entrepreneurship. We're trying to look at doing some of these things, and she's already got a commission that somebody has asked us to make. Somebody, their family is getting married, and they want a bride and groom, no. So we've gotta figure that one out, but we did make a grad gnome for at this, it didn't sell, I still got it, so we still have some at home, but yeah, so it's kind of cool.
Adam came to the finance committee on Tuesday.
Yeah. I met Adam, I felt like he was famous.
Yeah.
Andrew was so happy. Oh my gosh, we got a chance to see her. But yeah, no, so, and Nancy, we gotta thank you for showing up.
Exactly.
Chair. So, yeah, so he's proceeding, but yes, for everyone's looking forward to summer. I think it's. All right.
My daughter's
yes,
ready for grade 8.
That's a condition.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anyone else have any successes? Lyle, anything from you? You're good.
My little.
Absolutely.
So I think celebration and success. Thank you for your commitment this year. I can't believe it's been a year already, but it has. And just the learning that happens and the commitment to our students that happens at this table is exceptional. I didn't really know what SEAC was going to be like when I started, but I have to say it's just getting the community perspective and you helping us move forward in support of our students is incredible. So thank you for the feedback this year. We have little gifts for you on the table, so please take them with you when you go. Just really, really appreciate everything that you've brought to the system this year. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Keep those eyes alive.
Yeah, June.
I'm thinking that really, but we have September.
No, no, the election, our last official trustee dates is November the 14th is the last official day of, municipal elections are in October.
All right.
Yeah.
So then. Enjoy the summer. Our next SEAC meeting will be on September 10th, 2026. Everybody have a fantastic summer. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Everyone.
Jonah,
Yeah.
second. Liz, all in favor? Have a great summer, everybody. Bye.